Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are merging the streams of all of our sports coverage and 23 years of that, and 29 years of Nasty Nestor, all into one place, BaltimorePositive.com. Luke is there. I am there. Don Moeller is there. All of our sponsors are there, including our friends at Raskin Global, empowering people to choose their financial future. For over 33 years, Len Raskin stops by once a week, usually gives us some helpful hints on managing our money, as well as talking a little Ravens football. I'm sure he and Todd Schuler and Dennis, all of our sponsors, all our friends, got plenty to say in the aftermath of the little meltdown, but one without a whole lot of cost against the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday in Philly. Luke, I've been a little wistful lately in putting all this together, and there's a picture of Earl Weaver and I that I put in WNST Classic on the field at the Vet and thinking about old memories at the Vet. And I drove up to Philadelphia at 8:30 on a Sunday morning in the fall, seeing the leaves change. All that was missing was my pal Russ Lettra in his Eagles starter jacket, the Randall Cunningham, Reggie White, Jerome Brown era. Baldinger wore the 63. I saw a couple of throwbacks. As I left the building, there was a throwback Carmichael 17, which I thought was good. I saw 82 drop the ball, and all I thought about was Mike Quick or Torrey Smith. But so I had some weird Veterans Stadium, Eagles flashback. I've already shown you my pretzels, from the whole day. But, more than anything was the notion that I once sat in the Vet when they hired Rich Kotite. And there were these guys on the 50-yard line that used to unfurl this really long banner. And it said, "We're a tough town. Be a tough coach." And I thought on Sunday, I got a million of those, dude. I could go Live Aid stories. I could give you Phillies or Eagles. I could give you the time Rich Abrahams and I got thrown out of the Who concert, the time that Tommy Conwell opened for David Bowie on the Glass Spider tour. I said to my son on the way home, I'm bringing some pretzels. He's like, "Man, how many times do we come out of the Spectrum, Dad, after like a Flyers game?" And so even my son has weird memories of Philadelphia. But I thought to myself, this Carson Wentz guy, as he's leading this comeback for no one in particular, for cutouts in Philadelphia, and I'm watching the game and I'm watching all of the disappointment and, Warren Sapp coming in there and taking championship games away from Andy Reid. And I saw it all in sort of slow motion as I went through it, but I thought, man, pretty decent ending to a game, and a bad ending if you're an Eagles fan, a good ending if you're a Ravens fan. But we haven't had a whole lot of afternoons where I'm biting my nails at a Ravens game. So for that, it was a memorable Sunday afternoon in Philadelphia. I don't get many of those anymore, right?
Yeah, that's fair. And it's funny that you mentioned that because kind of thinking back, and look, these two teams play every 4 years, right? I mean, it's been 8 years since the Ravens went to Philadelphia, not counting the preseason and all that, but they quietly have a kind of an entertaining history together. I mean, I remember sitting in the open end zone at Memorial Stadium in 1997 when that was the Jay Graham.
Jay Graham
ran for all those yards.
Jay Graham was my guest the next night at the barn. I'll pull those pictures.
I want to say, didn't Vinny throw the pick from his knees in that game? Or I might be mixing that up with another one. But it ended up being a 10-10 tie. And I remember there were so many Philadelphia fans there. I was there with my father and a family friend of ours and his son. And there were so many fans just chanting back and forth, "We suck," because it was a tie. And how do you react to that? And so we all remember the trip to the Vet with the turf and Hard Knocks chronicling that in 2001. 2004 was the T.O. Ray Lewis game. And
my wife got called the C word, the B word, I thought about that on Sunday because we sat up in the little arch, on the north side. There's that little dog pound, for lack of a better description, in their stadium. My wife and I sat up there. Jamal Lewis. I just remember so many Ravens fans and the women and how the women in our section were being spoken to. It's like it was revolting. It was the most revolting experience I had at a football game until 2012, when I had a similar revolting experience in the inside part of the bowl with my wife again. So That is interesting. You bring both of those up because when I
Well,
think of Philadelphia football games, I don't think of either one of them or that stadium. When I think of that stadium, I think of seeing Springsteen on the Rising tour there. Like that's what I
right.
think about. I saw a soccer game at that. I saw Team USA play at Lincoln Financial, but we've only played there twice. I've been there a bunch of other times. You too. I've been there for a bunch of other things other than like Eagles games. I've only been to a couple, 2-3 Eagles games there, right? So I don't go much for that. Yeah, I would say that.
I saw a Penn State Temple game there some years ago as well, but
Didn't
but
Temple play Maryland there? I think they did, right?
probably at some point.
Yeah,
I
I think
can't
they did.
remember off the
Okay,
top of my
well,
head
either
what
way.
year it would have been, but and even last time, which wasn't in Philadelphia, it was in Baltimore. But remember that came down to a 2-point conversion, and the Ravens. That was the game where Flacco throws the pick. Harbaugh said after the game about Marty, it was the all-time worst call he's seen as far as a play call because the Ravens were up, I think, 10 late in the game, and Flacco throws a pick, and suddenly the Eagles were back in the game, and they went for 2 at the end that would have won the game in that
And
case.
the
So,
time, well, like this one, and the time before was the Andy Reid benching Donovan McNabb game in 8, right?
and that was Ed Reed 107-yard interception return. That's what I was saying. Like when you start thinking about it, it's a shame these teams don't play more often because they've
What was the
actually had some.
2000 game? Can you tell me? I don't want to
They
be
didn't play in
interrupted.
2000. They did, remember that was pre-divisional
Pre-merger,
alignment. Right.
right?
I'm
Okay.
looking at the series history right now. They played the
I'm
tie in
like, yeah, I have
'97
no
at Memorial
recollection of a
Stadium.
2000. Okay.
Yeah, they played in '97 the tie at Memorial Stadium, and then in '04 that was their next meeting. That was at the Link. That was the Ray Lewis T.O. game that I can still remember. That was actually not to put a damper on it. It was the last game I watched with my father before he passed away in
Oh,
'04.
okay.
I can still recall, and this gives you a little glimpse at what kind of passionate Baltimore sports fan my dad was. But I remember when T.O. scores and does the Ray Lewis dance, Dad said something to the effect of, "I hope someone breaks his legs," or something like that. I mean, it was, just heat of the moment, was angry. But I mean, just
I
we
felt
were,
the same way.
yeah, yeah. I
I
mean,
mean, I
that
was
was
in
some.
the stadium being taunted by Eagles fans when it was going on. It was not pleasant. I didn't sit in the press box in those days, Luke. There wasn't no
Yeah.
Twitter back then. But by the way, a great memory of your father. I want to plug my father on this occasion, not just my birthday being last week and your birthday being this month, but it was the anniversary of Game 5 of the '83 World Series this weekend as well at the Vet. And I did think about my dad because my dad and I were at the Vet. I was going to put my ticket stub up, but I think I've done that before. Because I was like on the roof of the roof of the roof of the Vet with my dad for that. So I have to fill it up. And my dad almost got in a fight leaving. You can only imagine how pissed off the Phillies fans were.
Yeah.
And my dad was taunting the Phillies fans on the way out. So
Maybe not a wise move, probably.
dude, I'm like, Dad, get in the car. Get into Malibu. Let's get the hell out of
That's
here. We
funny.
just won the World Series. Let's get out of here. Meanwhile, I'm wearing like my Pete Rose Bubble P shirt. But either way, Joe Morgan died last week, so I thought of that. The home run, right? Game 1.
Sure.
So there's been all sorts of Philadelphia. To your point, like we don't
You
have
wish
a rivalry, but like
you
when we
wish
do
they were in the
play,
same
it
division,
matters, right?
It'd be fun. I mean, and we've talked about these hypotheticals. I mean, I can remember when the Browns first came to town, became the Ravens, and everyone thought at the time, wow, wouldn't it be great if they played that team that we can't refer to them as that name anymore, or the Giants or Philadelphia. I mean, you think about some of those potential rivalries that are, close in proximity that, no regrets at this point. I mean, you see what they've been able to do with Pittsburgh and, I mean, Cincinnati and Cleveland, if they ever can get consistently at the level of where the Ravens and the Steelers are, it'd be fun. But yeah, it is something that it's fun to look back on the 6 times these teams have played. And other than that 2008 game, I mean, they've been really close games. And even that game, as you mentioned, was so memorable. Andy Reid benches McNabb and Ed Reed has a 107-yard interception return. I mean, yeah, so it's been some fun encounters with these teams.
What
And
would your father make of your sister marrying an Eagles fan? What would he make of that?
he
at
would have
this
been
point?
fine with it. Greg's a classy guy, and hey, he has
One of
plenty
the
of.
very few, I might
Yeah,
add.
exactly.
I'll tell you what, it was weird going up there with like no fans and feel like when I get out of the car, I'm like, I can wear some purple today. I got to walk about 50 feet. I get to, and they welcome you with the Philadelphia accent when you're up there. The whole. It's not like I love our experience of going to games, but there is something about going to these other places where you get these experiences. And Philadelphia, and dare I say Washington, what an experience I had 2 weeks ago. It was a great miso salmon. I did point that out. But that's an experience that I don't relish at all, ever. I would rather drive to Philadelphia 10 times before I would drive to Washington to see anything football related, right? And there is a part of the Eagles fans that was sort of missing certainly for me. You don't go to Philadelphia, go into that stadium, having been there for U2 and Springsteen and all of these other things, even if you've only been there a handful of times. And I've been to a ton of Eagles games. It was weird for me, just seeing the jerseys and the throwbacks, hearing the voice of Merrill Reese on the way in while having the smell of pretzels in the car. I thought of Russ Letcher. The throwback game of the day on the radio was a game I was at with the Phoenix Cardinals, So from the 80s with Randall Cunningham, the NFL, I miss it.
But it was, hey, it was an entertaining game, as you said. A little too entertaining for Ravens fans' taste, I'm sure. But
what would Harry Callis? I could just hear it.
Yeah, no question. But I think you still, there's still some positives to take away. And as much as you don't like what the defense looked like in the fourth quarter, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention how well the defensive line stepped up, specifically Calais Campbell, when you consider you weren't going to have Derek Wolfe. He had the concussion/neck thing back in practice on Wednesday and was doubtful, so we knew he wasn't going to play. And then Saturday, which I will say, Brandon Williams normally gets veteran days off on Thursday, so him not being out there on Thursday did not raise any red flags whatsoever. Was not out there again on Friday. John Harbaugh at that point in time said it's a personal excused absence, but it still seemed a little odd. And one thing I will point out, and I didn't write this because I don't know how you would even report it in any kind of context of what's going on. They're very, as you know, there aren't many secrets in that building that get out as it is, especially with something related to COVID and the virus and testing. You're not going to have people that are whispering about that ahead of time. But Brandon Williams placed on the reserve COVID list, as of Sunday, had not tested positive, which is a good thing. You hope that continues. But that list is also for if you've had a close contact experience with someone that has tested positive. And we assume, and we don't know, and I don't want to speculate too much, but whether it's someone in his family, a close personal friend that he spent time with outside of the building, he's on that list. So 24 hours prior to the game, that you're not going to have your nose tackle. And
that could be Jackson, Lamar. That could
sure, it could be anyone.
Brady,
right.
Tom.
Anyone.
That's where we are with the plague, right? It was Cam Newton a couple weeks ago.
Sure. And really from a football standpoint, you have to treat that in the same way that if Brandon Williams woke up and his back locked up. That's how you have to treat it from a football perspective, and just saying, well, it's like an injury. He's not available.
He's got the flu, right?
Right. Or someone he's just exposed, whether he's asymptomatic or never tests positive. Hopefully that's the case, and he's back in by next week and all that. But the Ravens, we know their recent history when he's not out there. Typically they have trouble stopping the run. And you look at that, Sanders, of course, busted the long one, but for large stretches of that game, Philadelphia didn't run the ball as effectively. Of course, a 74-yard run and a 40-yard run is really going to jack up their yards per carry to the point where it looked insane at the end of the game. But Calais Campbell, huge for them, bigger workload. And when you don't have Derek Wolfe or Brandon Williams, you're not only counting on more from Campbell, and he had 3 sacks, had another quarterback hit, had another tackle for a loss, played tremendous football, but you're then counting on Justin Ellis, and you're counting on Justin Madubuike and Broderick Washington. So
you're also asking Judon to do more, and the guys that are there.
Yeah. Oh, sure. No question about it. And look, did they could you say they wore down? Whether they wore down, lost focus, got complacent, however you want to characterize it in the fourth quarter. It wasn't good enough. That was obvious, but you did see them play at a high level in the first half and for much of the third quarter. And, I don't want to put too much stock into that and be too dismissive of the fourth quarter, but by and large, the body of work for this defense has been incredibly impressive. And even though Philadelphia's offensive line was absolutely decimated, I mean, they were down to one original starter from where they were in June, what they thought their offensive line was going to look like. So just put that in perspective when we're talking about the Ravens not having Marshall Yanda for some context as far as how big your problems can actually be relative to what the Ravens are dealing with. But it was good to see them get pressure again. I still have my questions and concerns about this pass rush against better offenses, against better offensive lines. But much like we saw against Cincinnati, when you're going up against an overmatched group, 16 quarterback hits, 6 sacks. They had 7 sacks last week. That was good to see. But specifically, Calais Campbell, what he was able to do and just dominated at the line of scrimmage. The Ravens needed that because we know what the history has looked like as far as their run defense without Brandon Williams. And I get it. People will look at the stats and say, Luke, what the heck are you talking about? They averaged over 10 yards per carry. But again, they ran 18 times, 74-yard run and a 40-yard run. They count just like anything else. I'm not saying they don't, but it's clear that the running game was not a major factor for Philadelphia in that first half when the Ravens were able to pick up a 17-point lead.
I almost got meatballs to bring home, and I looked on the menu, and they had an Italian dish served vermeil style. And I thought, that's not like vermicelli. That's like Dick Vermeil. The Philadelphia part of this, and I guess seeing them go away and say, all right, the Carson Wentz, the quarterback artist who's got the beautiful mind and all of that, maligned, given nothing on offense, and then yet at the end, he's running around and no one could tackle him. There was something for me to say that, I liked seeing the defense get that kind of competition because they didn't get that from Joe Burrow 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. If you're trying to figure out what you can take away from this game other than just saying, well, they need to get better.
Well, by the way, when you're saying they have to get after the quarterback, I find it often and early that we'll say, we really miss Marshall Yanda around here, but you're never going to hear me say, we really miss Terrell Suggs around here. But they miss that kind of player.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if this team had a 2011 Terrell Suggs or a 2001 Peter Boulware, that changes things a lot.
I thought about McCrary on Sunday.
Yeah, Michael McCrary. Rob Burnett in 2000. Go down the list. Elvis Dumervil had a monster season, a couple really good seasons for the Ravens, but they don't have that guy. So they have to scheme, and they're creating pressure, and they're relying on their coverage on the back end, which works very well against most of the teams in the league. Again, what does it look like in January when you're going up against better offenses? What does it look like in the month of November when they're going to go up against some better teams? We'll see. But as far as how they like to play, they were able to get after Carson Wentz big time. But as far as what you mentioned, with the fourth quarter and giving up some big plays, giving up the chunk plays, some inopportune penalties. Jihad Ward with the roughing the passer, whether you agreed with the Marcus Peters PI or not, that's a big play there. Obviously, those are experiences that you hope, and the fact that they were able to come away with the win still, you hope that they can learn from that.
I guess I'm not as unhappy about it as I probably could and should be. Maybe it's because I'm 52 now, and I do look at it as it was an opportunity for Judon, Queen, all of the L.J. Ford at the end saved their ass. It's a chance for Calais Campbell to come in as a leader. It's a chance for Brandon Williams to come in next week and say, hey, man, I'm back. It's good. You guys held your water. There were a lot of sort of teachable point. And we talked about Marcus Peters, and certainly Marlon Humphrey got his feelings hurt, during the course of the day. And let's praise him for 1 minute, because we've been on and on and on and on and on about the fall apart and 2 points and 2 yards and 2 weeks and, and all of this. They take the ball away. There's an instinct about their ability to strip the ball. And we haven't talked about it, so I think we should. That is going to serve them well on a cold day in January.
Oh, it's already served them very well throughout the season. This team's ability to forced turnovers. I mean, I can recall 3, 4, 5 years ago when these Dean Pease defenses statistically looked pretty good, and it's not as though they had bad defenses, but I'd much rather have a team that gives up some yardage here and there. And you don't even have to be number one in scoring defense necessarily, although ultimately, yeah, you want to keep the team off, the opponent off the scoreboard. That's the obvious statement. But those turnovers, when you force those, and especially when you force them in your opponent's territory, I mean, that is such a game changer from a win probability standpoint. That is such a game changer in terms of just putting you in much, much better position to come away with a victory. I mean, look at the fumble. I mean, yeah, they forced multiple fumbles, but look at the one that they recovered. It puts the Ravens on a really short field. You know, when Deshaun Elliott forces the fumble, Chuck Clark, the ball kind of bounced around. He fumbles it, and Jimmy Smith finally gets it. Puts the Ravens offense that has struggled, and we've talked about it. Hasn't been as consistent. Puts them at the 28-yard line. I mean, it's just it makes things that much easier for your offense. So we didn't think that was necessarily going to be all that important this year, but it has been because this offense hasn't been what it was last year. So their ability to force fumbles specifically. I mean, it's one thing to talk about when the quarterback overthrows a receiver and you're playing some zone coverage and your guy's right there and he picks off a pass. It's one thing to talk about fumble recoveries, which so much luck is involved with that. But this team's ability to rip the ball away, led by Marlon Humphrey. But we saw Deshaun Elliott, who, by the way, mentioned after the game that Saturday night he was watching video of Marlon Humphrey to look at his technique as far as the way that and I think this is the big thing. Guys have gone for the football for a long time. We've seen that. That's not anything new. You can go back and find guys from the 80s and 90s trying to strip the football away. But the way that Marlon Humphrey does it, and it's so impressive. And I saw Peanut Tillman, the great defensive back for the Bears back in the day, giving him a shout out. But he puts his other arm around the ball carrier's waist, so he secures the tackle, so to speak, before he punches. It's not as though he's just wildly going in there trying to strip the football and he misses and then the guy's off and running. Remember, that happened against Juju Smith-Schuster against Pittsburgh last year, the road game last year, and he ended up scoring a touchdown then. Now, later in the game, he forced the fumble. So he's extraordinary at it. He's one of the absolute best I've seen at that specific skill. And to see Deshaun Elliott then force 2 fumbles on Sunday, I mean, you've got some guys that have an aptitude for ball hawking and forcing turnovers. And those are things that are important anyway. But when you have an offense that's not clicking and can really benefit from some shorter fields, and then that happened some last year too. I don't want to make it sound like it's something brand new, but that makes all the world a world of difference. And it turns a game like we saw with Cincinnati or some of these other games where you look at the offense and say, well, that didn't look all that special from an eyeball test standpoint. But you get a couple short fields and your offense is able to take advantage in those spots at the very least. It turns a game that feels closer than the scoreboard reflects. And that's a huge skill to have. And I will gladly take an offense or a defense that can force turnovers than one that finishes first in total yards and does this bend but don't break thing.
Good, bad, ugly, and it's bye week, and the Ravens are 5-1. We'll have Pittsburgh coming off a Tennessee game this week. We're all getting tested. We're all washing our hands and wearing our masks and behaving. I had a glorious day in Philadelphia on Sunday. Luke's taking a bye week. The Ravens will be back out at the facility in Owings Mills. Luke will be on all things there. You can find him, Luke, at WNST.net, as well as what we've done here to merge together WNST.net with Baltimore Positive out on your mobile device that works landscape and portrait as well. All of it brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness. $5 down, $10 a month, no commitment, and always judgment-free and safe. Find out all the things they're doing to work out and work in at Planet Fitness. Also, our friends at Taharka Ice Cream. I began one of our segments on Sunday night with the Eric Weddle used to eat ice cream to celebrate, so I had some ice cream. I had the pumpkin cheesecake along with the pumpkin latte. I'm holding up the vanilla bean, which is going to go very, very nicely with my pumpkin pie next month as well. Taharka, social change, serving it up one scoop at a time. And you can get that delivered wherever you happen to be. Reminder for everyone to vote this week. We're going into a major Baltimore Positive week here as we have the bye as well. Make sure you're supporting our sponsors who put this thing together. There is a whole new wonderland of cool stuff at WNST.net and BaltimorePositive.com.